Okay, so yan. So we're going to have another topic for today which will talk about okay, so yan. So our topic for today class will be all about okay, so it was the Newton's laws of motion. Okay, before, so pinag-aralan nyo yung forces, so different kind of forces, balance and unbalanced forces, even the contact and non-contact forces. So all these forces are actually part of motion and meron tayong Newton's laws of motion na matatopic natin ngayon this time. Okay? So it was Sir Isaac Newton. Okay, so year 1643 to 1727. Okay? So yan. Sir Isaac Newton is an English scientist and mathematician famous for his discovery for the law of gravity. So siya yung naka-discover ng law of gravity. Okay? Also discovered the three laws of motion. So kilala niyo yan si Isaac Newton. Okay? So yan, he published them in his book Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica. So that means mathematic principles of natural philosophy. Okay? So today, these laws are actually known as Newton's laws of motion. Kasi siya yung nag-discover. Okay? Siya yung naka-discover, idea niya yun, and describe the motion of all objects on the scale we experience in our everyday life. So that was Isaac Newton. So you can search over the internet kung ano yung itsura niya. So mahaba yung buhok niya. Okay? So
pwede screenshot po?
Pwede. Okay? So that was Isaac Newton. So makikita niyo naman yan kasi you have your reference naman sa book. So makikita niyo dyan. That was on page 15 of your book. Di ba may book naman kayo?
Meron po, sir.
Okay, so that's nice. So makikita niyo dyan. Okay? So kung ano ba yung Newton's laws of motion. Pero we'll tackle that now today. Okay, so another so meron tayong actually three laws of motion. Okay, so yan pala, meron tayong picture kay Isaac Newton. So mahaba yung buhok niya. So if it happens na makita niyo siya and you were asked who is this person, so you tell them Sir Isaac Newton.
Sir,
okay? Ano po?
ano pong page?
That was page 15 of your book. Okay, so this is his quotation. So if I have ever made any valuable discoveries, it has been owing more to patient attention than to any other talent. So yan. So that was his quotation. Okay, so yan. So Isaac Newton. Okay? So we have actually class 3 laws of motion. So I want you to take note of this. So sa book nyo, meron din tayong tatlo. So yung una, Newton's first law of motion. So second one and the third one. Pero matatopic natin kasi meron niya mga description yung mga laws of motion. Okay? So for the first law of motion, so makikita nyo here, merong tatlo. For the first law of motion, it states that an object in motion, when we speak of motion, ano nga yun? Giselle? Giselle, pag sinabing motion, ano nga?
A change in an object position.
Okay, so motion means a change in an object's position. So thank you for that, Giselle. Okay? So an object in motion, so that means yung object may change in position, tends to stay in motion. Okay, so and an object at rest tends to stay at rest. Unless when we speak of unless, yun, unless acted upon by unbalanced force. So yun, always remember class that pag balance force, okay, so pag balance force, an object in motion will remain in motion. Okay, so when we speak of motion, so that means uniformly moving object. So like planets around the sun, like the moon around the earth. So they are actually in motion. They are actually uniform in motion. Why? Because their speed revolving around the sun, or the earth revolving around the sun, is the same all throughout. Okay, so yan, the earth revolving around the sun is an object in motion, is an example of an object in motion. And according to the first law of motion, so an object in motion tends to stay in motion. Okay, so for example, the earth will remain in motion unless acted upon by unbalanced force. So when is the time na pwedeng matigil yung pag-revolve ng earth? When is the time na pwedeng makabilis yung pag-revolve ng earth? When is the time na pwedeng mapabagal yung pag-revolve ng earth around the sun? So that is the time when there is a presence of unbalanced force. So yan na. So mababago lang yung bilis ng revolve ng pag-ikot ng earth around the sun if there will be an unbalanced force. So, unbalanced force may come from another object. So, pwedeng asteroid, pwedeng comet, pwedeng another planet, or pwedeng any other unidentified object. So, yun. So, kapag, for example, nabanggaan niya yung earth, or nag-collide, so there is a possibility na magkaroon ng change in the state of motion of the earth. Okay? So, another thing, so an object at rest tend to stay at rest unless acted upon by unbalanced force. So, take a look for have a ball at rest as our example. Okay? Supposed to be the ball is at rest, so walang gumagalaw. So, if there will, kapag hindi yan gumagalaw, so that means at rest siya. So, that means balance yung forces niya. So, the normal force, which is upward force, and the gravity, which is downward force, are actually balanced. Kaya, at rest yung ball. Okay? So unless acted upon by unbalanced force, so therefore, ano yung unbalanced force? So, sabi ko, unbalanced force may come from another object. Okay? For example, sinipa ng bata. Okay? So, yun yung another object na tinutukoy ko. So, unbalanced force, or yung tinatawag nating external net force. So, galing yun sa bata. Okay? So, sinipa niya yung ball. So, that could change the state of motion of the rest ball, of the at rest ball. Okay? So, yun yung ibig sabihin, okay, ng unbalanced force, ng first law of motion. So yung first law of motion, I want you to take note of this. So, makikita mo naman sa libro. So, yung tawag sa kanya is law of inertia. Okay? So, law of inertia. Okay? So, magkaroon na muna tayo ng preview. So, mamaya ito-talk natin kung ano ba yung inertia. Okay? So, number 2 na muna tayo. Okay? So, for number 2, force equals mass times acceleration. It's more of equation. Okay? So, equation yung pinapakita dito. Okay? Yung second law, so if you look at your book, so makikita mo siya. So, that was on page 19. It's law of acceleration. Okay? So, makikita mo dito, merong acceleration. So, ano yung mga factors na kasama dito sa law of acceleration? So, tingnan mo, meron siyang F, which stands for force, M, which stands for mass, and A stands for acceleration. So, bakit kaya merong ganitong equation? So, bakit kaya ganito yung law of acceleration? Okay? So, mamaya we'll find out that. Okay? So, for number 3, okay, so this is simple. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Okay, so that means it's an action-reaction. Okay, so action-reaction. So, if you look at your book, so wag nyo na munang basahin masyado. So page 23, so it's law of action and reaction. And sometimes, or some other books, they call it law of interaction. Law of interaction or law of action and reaction. Kasi action and reaction comes from two different objects, so interaction of objects. Okay, kaya some other books tinatawag siyang law of interaction. Okay? So, yun yung ano natin, preview natin. So, later, malalaman natin why the statement of these laws are like this. Okay? Okay, so can we continue? So, yes, we can continue. Okay, so first law of motion. Okay, so ano nga yung first law of motion? Can you still remember?
An object or
Inertia.
emotion
Okay, so-
tend to say emotion.
Hindi, what I mean, yung description, ay yung ano lang, yung title ng first law of motion is,
Inertia.
okay, so law of inertia. Okay, so an object at rest tends to stay at rest, and an object in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by unbalanced force. So medyo nakakalito, okay? Pero from the title itself, inertia. So let us define what is inertia. So yan, we'll stop here. So I'll provide you with a video. Wait lang para at least hindi kayo mawala. Okay, so let's ng inertia. Meron ako ditong video about inertia. Okay, so this will talk about inertia and mass. So this was from Don't Memorize YouTube channel. Okay. Oops, sorry.
To understand inertia, we need to look at Newton's first law of motion again.
Okay.
Here it is. In simple words, this means that objects tend to keep on doing what they are doing. It is the natural tendency of every object to resist change in their state of motion.
Okay, so yung dalawa. Okay, so dalawa lang yan. Okay, yung sa state ng motion. Okay? So yung motion, dalawa lang yan. Okay, so at rest, state of motion to even na at rest siya, it's actually a state of motion. Okay, so at rest and in motion or constantly moving motion. So in inertia, prefers staying at rest because it resists the change. Okay, so in motion, it prefers staying in motion because it resists the change. Okay, so yun. Okay, so inertia, all objects have inertia. However, according to this, so all objects depends on how strong an object can resist the change in the state of motion. Inertia depends on how strong an object can resist changes. Okay, so which one would be easier to push?
Sir, yung maliit.
Sir, yung maliit.
Yung maliit. So, let's continue the video. Okay, so yung factor dito, yung factor sa inertia is actually the weight. Okay, so the heavier the object, so the more it is tendency to resist. Okay, so nga naman, kung alin yung mas mabigat, yun yung mas mahirap na itulak. Okay, so yun. Okay, so yun yung relative relation ng inertia sa mass and inertia. If you increase the mass, so the inertia will also increase. Okay? Okay, so yun. Yung mass is the measure of its inertia. So yun, we've tackled already about inertia, which all objects has this. So mass, it's the measure of inertia. So parang nakakalito, okay? So, but that is actually, so yun yung inertia, okay? So, let's stop the share for a while. So, let's continue with our slide. So, I hope you understand what inertia means. Okay, so mag-e-end yung video natin mga ilang ano na. Okay, so tapos mag-join na lang kayo ulit. Okay? So, yun. So, tandaan nyo, always remember that an object in motion tends to stay in motion. Okay? And an object at rest tends to stay at rest with the same speed if it's in motion and in the same direction if it's in motion unless acted upon by unbalanced force. Okay? So, let's continue. Okay, so what does this mean? So basically, so an object will keep an object will keep doing what it was doing. So it has inertia. Okay, so unless acted upon by unbalanced force. So as I said, yung unbalanced force dito comes from another object. Okay? So, if the object was sitting still, so it will remain stationary. Pag sinabing stationary, at rest, so not moving, no motion. Okay? So, if it was moving at a constant velocity, so pag sinabing constant velocity, so same yung speed niya all throughout, like planet revolving around the sun. So, hindi nagbabago, hindi bumibilis, hindi bumabagal. So, it will keep moving at a constant velocity or uniform velocity. Constant, uniform, that pertains to the same thing. Okay? So, it takes force to change the motion of an object. So, itong force na to, yung sinasabi ko, so, it comes from an unbalanced force, another object. Okay? So, yun, like asteroid, like comet, pero hindi lang siya nalilimit dun sa example natin na planet. Okay? So, what is meant by unbalanced force? So yun na. Ano nga yung unbalanced force? If you still remember our previous topic. Ano nga yung unbalanced force? Anyone from the class? Can I ask from Sean? Ano nga yung unbalanced force, Sean?
Are forces that result in an object motion being changed.
Okay, so when there is a change in the state of motion, there is a presence of unbalanced force. Okay, so parang binasa mo yun. Okay, so that's okay. So pag unbalanced force, di ba we learn how to combine forces. Okay, so kapag yung resultant force is more than 0 Newton, so that means merong unbalanced force. Okay? So, pag merong unbalanced force, according to Sean, so that's good, there will be a change in the state of motion. Okay? So, yun. So, tandaan nyo yun yung unbalanced force na yun. Okay, so, sorry. Okay, so here, pinakita ko na sa inyo, the forces on the book are said to be balanced because there will be no change in the state of motion. So, the book will remain at rest. Okay? So, because of the two equal forces acting on the book, the normal force, which is upward direction, and the gravity, which is downward direction. Okay? So, if the forces on an object are equal and opposite, they are said to be balanced, and the object experiences no change. When it is balanced, no change in the state of motion. Okay? So, hindi yan motion, in the state of motion. If they are not equal and opposite, then the forces are unbalanced and the motion of an object changes. If at rest, when we speak of changes in the state of motion, sabi ko, 4 lang yan. Changes in the state of motion. Whether na yung at rest object will move, whether na yung constantly moving object or with constant velocity moving object, so we'll try to speed up, we'll try to slow down, or we'll try to stop. Okay, so 4 lang yan. Okay? 4 lang yung change ng state of motion as I said from our previous topic. Okay? So next. So these are some examples. So a soccer ball is sitting at rest. It takes an unbalanced force of a kick So, yung unbalanced force here is the kick from another object. So, ano yung another object na yung tao, bata, or whatever. Okay, so, unbalanced force of a kick to change in state of motion. So, when there is a kick, so there is an unbalanced force, therefore, at rest will, this ball will have a change in the state of motion. So, it will move. Okay, so, yan. So, this one, tug of war is an example. Okay? So, kapag mas malakas yung other side, so, magkakaroon ng change in state of motion. Okay? So, yun. So, two teams are playing tug of war. They are both exerting equal force on the rope in opposite direction. This balanced force result in no change in the state of motion. Okay? So, no change in the state of motion because two groups are of equal amount of force being exerted on the rope, pulling. Okay? So, what if sumama si Jazil dito sa other side? So, pag sumama si Jazil sa other side ng group, so hindi na mababalance. So, si Jazil, yung unbalanced force. Okay? So, si Jazil yung unbalanced force here. Okay? So, I hope you're getting the sense of this discussion. Okay? So, next. Okay. So, ano po?
Nag-disconnect daw po si Samantha Amber, tas walang kuryente daw po dun kay Jazil.
Okay.
Nandito na ako.
So, si Samantha Amber nag-disconnect. Okay. So that's okay. So, next, inertia. So, ito na yung inertia, the tendency of an object to resist changes. So, na-topic na to from the video. So, according to this, all objects have inertia. But sino nga yung may mataas na inertia? The higher the mass of an object, the higher the inertia. Okay, so inertia is the tendency of an object to resist changes. However, inertia is the measure, mass is the measure of inertia of an object. So, yun yung pagkaka-define, okay, ng video. Okay, so the more mass of an object has, the more inertia it has. And the harder it is to change in the state of motion. Yun. Mas mabigat or mas mataas yung mass, mas malakas yung inertia. Mas malakas na ma-change yung state of motion. Okay? So, same goes applies to you. Kapag malaki yung tao, kalaban mo malaking tao. For example lang, pero walang totohanan na. Halimbawa, you go in a boxing. Okay? So ikaw maliit, tapos yung kalaban mo masyadong malaki. Okay, so pag sinuntok mo yung malaki, so parang wala lang sa kanya because yung malaking boxer, malakas yung inertia, okay, because of greater mass. Pero pag ikaw yung sinuntok, ikaw yung maliit, sinuntok ka ng malaking boxer, so masyado kang maaapektuhan, okay, because you have only lesser inertia as compared to the other one. Okay, so inertia is basically means power. Okay, so sa ngayon, okay, even sa mga vehicles, so mas malaki yung vehicle mo, mas mataas yung inertia mo, siya yung lamang sa kalsada. Okay, so for me, inertia basically means power. Okay, so yun. Next, okay, these are more examples. So a powerful locomotive. Okay, so nagkaroon tayo ng disconnection. Let's wait for my students.
Sir, connecting pa rin daw po si Angela sa kanina. Mahina din daw po yung internet niya.
Okay. Noted. Okay, so I think we can continue na. So let me continue my presentation. Okay, so may dumadating pa. Okay, so yan. So ito yung more examples ng law of inertia. Okay, so a powerful locomotive begins to pull a long line of boxcars that were sitting at rest. So since the boxcars are so massive, mabigat, kasi long line of boxcars. So they have a great deal of inertia and it takes a larger force to change their state of motion. So once they are moving, it takes a larger force to stop them. So nagigets nyo kung ano yung ibig sabihin dito. So ano ba yung boxcars? Ano yung boxcars? Anyone from the class knows the term boxcars? Sige nga.
Sir,
Po.
Yung dala-dala lang
pwede
train.
mamali.
Yung cargo.
Pwede, ano yung train?
Pwedeng mamali.
Sir, yung guess ko po yung parang ano ng train, yung kagaya ng sabi
No,
ni
no.
Gary.
Yung ano po, ano? Yung ano po yun, Jayla?
Yung kagaya po yung sabi ni Gary, yung ano ng train.
Okay, so...
Cargo.
Parang cargo. Okay, so yun. Okay, so yun yung ano, parang section siya ng train, yung pinaglalagay ng mga ano. Yung cargo nga, okay? So, cargo. Okay, so, yan. Basta yung section siya ng train na may ano, yung hinahata. Okay, so yun.
Thomas.
Okay, yung boxcars, kapag napakabigat niya, so, di ba, at rest siya. So, it will take larger force for you to change or for you to move that boxcars. Okay? So, when once it keeps moving, so it also takes larger force to stop that boxcars. So, naiintindihan nyo? So, yun. So, yun yung napaka-ironic, di ba? So, it takes larger force to move that boxcars and it also takes larger force to stop that boxcars. So yun. So because it has great deal of inertia. Okay? So next. So on your way to school, so a bug flies onto your windshield if you are in a car. So since the bug is so small, so it has very little inertia and exerts a very small force on your car so that you don't even feel it. Okay, so yon. So kawawa naman yung bug flies kasi yung bug kasi siya nasaktan yung car mo, hindi man lang na ano. Okay, because mas mataas yung inertia ng car as compared to bug. Okay, so yon. Sabi ko nga baga, inertia means power. So the higher inertia you have in your body, so the higher power you have. Okay, so yun lang. Inertia is power for me. Okay, so next. So if an object in motion tends to stay in motion, why don't moving objects keep moving forever? Okay, so this is a very good question dito sa presentation. So if the object in motion tends to stay in motion, okay, so why don't moving objects keep moving forever? Okay, so bakit kaya yung moving objects hindi nag-keep moving forever? So yung answer, things don't keep moving forever because there's almost always an unbalanced force acting upon it. Okay? So, yan, there will always come a time that there will be an unbalanced force that will stop or slow down that constantly moving object. So yan, yung ano natin, yung example kung binibigay ka ninyo kanina pa, yung planet Earth, for example. So, di ba, the Earth is uniformly moving around the sun. It's constantly moving around the sun. So, don't you think that the Earth will continue to revolve around the sun forever? So, hindi natin masasabing forever. Okay? So, hindi natin kasi masasabing forever. Why? So, that question is raised to everyone. So, why kaya? If yes or no. So, sino yung nagsasabi that the Earth will continue to move forever? Sige nga. So, sino yung nagsasabi dito? So, sino yung agree that the Earth will continue to revolve around the sun forever? Raise your hand physically para makita ko. Okay, si Antoinette, parang ano ka, parang alanganin pa yung pag-raise ng hand. So, according to our Antoinette, so don't worry, it's actually an opinion kasi hindi pa naman natin sigurado. So, hindi naman natin alam kung ano yung bukas, okay? So, according to Antoinette, so her opinion, the Earth will continue to move forever. Sino naman yung nagsasabing no? Okay, so si Sean, si Raymond. Okay, so madami-dami. Okay, so si Gilmar. So madami-dami. So let me ask the opinion of Antoinette kasi siya lang yung nakita kong nagsabing will continue to move forever. Bakit kaya Antoinette?
Sir, ang ano po magre-revolve lang sa sun or pwede naman po kasing yung earth makakuha din ng isa pang source ng gravitational force na magre-revolve ulit.
Okay. So very good. So according to Antoinette, so yung sinasabi niya, yung hindi forever, yung magre-revolve around the sun. But yung forever sa kanya, it will continue to revolve not only for the sun but for another object. So, very good. It's actually a nice question kasi yung solar system natin contains the sun and other planets. And the solar system is also revolving around the galaxy. So, very good. It's actually a nice answer for you, Antoinette. So, that's nice. Okay, so how about for so yun yung sabi mo, Antoinette, that even though that Earth will not move around the sun, there will come a time na meron siyang another object na pagre-revolvean. Okay? So, very good. So, what can I actually know the side of Sean? Okay? So, bakit naman yung sagot mo that the Earth will not continue to move?
Generation, top 1.
Ano lang po,
Go
my
top 1.
instincts.
Okay? Kasi hindi pa naman natin sigurado.
Napagod yung earth.
Okay, pero can you defend your instinct? Kasi maganda yung instinct. Ako naniniwala ako sa instinct ko. For most of the time.
Sir, di ako sir masyadong di ako sir masyadong sa science. Yung
Hindi
iba dyan,
ka.
sir, mga
Pero even though you are not actually inclined to science, so can you give some of your idea why Earth will not continue to move around the sun? Further idea pa?
sir, parang wala na sir.
Sino yung ibang nag-raise ng hand? How about Gilmar?
Si Gary po.
Gilmar, Gary.
Same po kayo siya.
Oo nga sir, si Gary sir.
Wait.
Same po kayo siya.
Lagi ang may
kagaya
lecture
ng
sa
kay
science.
Sa'yo, Gary, what is your idea?
Sir, mapapagod yung Earth.
Napapagod yung Earth. Okay, so... napapagod ba yung Earth? O kaya napapagod yung Earth na dalhin tayo? Joke lang. Okay, so yun,
Sir, ang bibigat daw natin.
ang bibigat daw, lalo
Sir,
na si
baka sir
ano.
pagod ng paikot.
Se.
Okay, so yung bigat natin, it's actually almost negligible to Earth po. Ano?
Para po sa akin, because of the para lang po sa akin yung opinion ko
Okay lang, okay
because
lang.
of the pollution, baka slowly na ma-pollute yung earth, pati po yung insect, pati po yung core na naging unhealthy na po yung earth, slowly stop moving and then baka mawala na
Okay.
yun.
So according to Jaila, so I understand what you mean. So according to Jaila, yung pollution, yung mga maling ginagawa sa Earth could have a tendency na magkaroon ng epekto sa pag-revolve ng around the sun. Okay? So pwede rin naman. So yun, I accept your opinion, Jaila. So that's good. That pollution can affect the revolution around the sun of Earth. Okay, so yun. So things don't keep moving forever because there's almost always unbalanced force acting upon it. So according to this answer, there's almost always. So dalawa yung ginamit niya, almost and always. There's almost always an unbalanced force acting upon it. Why? So hindi lang Earth and Sun yung nasa universe. So there are many objects or celestial objects in the universe. So yun, pwedeng mabanggaan yung Earth ng another object, like comet, like asteroid, like another planet, or any other. So that will suddenly change the state of motion of Earth. Okay? Pag sinabing change the state of motion, so nagkaroon lang ng change ng state of motion, pwedeng nag-speed up, pwedeng mag-slow down, pwedeng at rest. Pero nagre-rest ba yung mga celestial object? So, hindi. Because yung solar system nga, even the solar system, all the contents of the solar system are actually revolving around the center of our galaxy. Okay? So, the Milky Way. So yun. I like the answer actually of Antoinette. Si Antoinette. Okay, so yun. So, even that the Earth changes, so it will continue to move to another object. Okay, so but I also appreciate your answers too. Okay, so yun. Let's continue. Okay, so here, a book sliding across a table slows down and stop because of force of friction. Di ba yung friction? So, yung topic natin about forces, friction is the opposing force. Okay? So, it opposes the movement of an object. So, if the object moves in the rightward direction, so the friction will actually act on the leftward direction. Okay, so friction always stops the moving object. Okay, so yun. In the case of Earth, yung Earth kasi walang lesser yung friction na nasasagap niya just because space nga siya. Okay, so pag sinabing space, no matter in it. Okay, so kaya yun. No friction yung sa Earth. Kaya constantly moving lang. Okay? So yun. So, if you throw a ball upwards, it will eventually slow down and fall because of the force of gravity. Okay? So, yun. Force of gravity. Di ba yung friction, we have actually two types. We have, if it happens na napag-aralan nyo na siya, yung friction, we have yung static friction. So the friction present in at rest object, and the kinetic friction, the friction that opposes the moving object, yung static friction. Okay, yung static friction is an example of a contact force. Okay, so kasama na din sa static friction yung air resistance. Okay, it's actually a friction, special type of friction. So just pandagdag lang. Okay. Okay, so next. Okay, so in an outer space, away from gravity, so masyado nang malayo sa gravity, lesser na yung force ng gravity, and inner sources of friction, a rocket ship launched with a certain speed and direction would keep going in that the same direction and that the same speed forever. Okay, so kasi wala na yung force ng gravity, wala na yung force ng gravity, and since it's an outer space, so walang friction. Okay, sa outer space. Wala namang hangin sa outer space. Okay? Kaya nga siya space. Okay? So, the rocket ship will continue to move in that the same direction and same speed forever. Pero yung sa case ng ng mga satellite, so balance yung sa gravity and yung sa kasi yung satellite nagre-revolve around the sun. Okay, so around the earth. Okay, yung mga satellites. So pero normally it will keep going in the same direction and in the same speed forever. Okay, so kasi lesser yung external or unbalanced force dito sa outer space. Okay, so let's talk now about second law of motion. Okay, so tapusin na natin to. Ano bang oras na? Okay, so hindi pa naman. Okay, so Newton's second law of motion. So binigyan tayo sa una nating force equals mass times acceleration. Force is equal to mass times acceleration. F is equal to ma. So why? Bakit kaya F is equal to ma? So as I said earlier, the Newton's...
Sir, may kukunin lang po.
Okay, so as I said earlier, the Newton's second law of motion is also called as what? Ano nga yung second law of motion? Law of what?
Law of acceleration.
Acceleration.
Okay, so parang nag-loading
Nauna ako.
Okay, it's law of acceleration. Okay, so kasi yung
So, mag-share lang po.
Sige na. So, kasi yung law of acceleration is actually a factor in this second law. Okay? So, yun. Pag sinabi nating acceleration, what does it mean? So, acceleration. So, acceleration is a measurement of how quickly an object is changing speed. Okay? So, how quickly, when we speak of how quickly, the rate of an object in changing speed. Okay? So, kasi basically class, yung changing speed, dalawa yan. Pwedeng speeding up, acceleration, or pwedeng slowing down. Yung slowing down is also an acceleration because it has changing speed. Okay? Pero some other references, so tinatawag siyang deceleration. Okay? So, but basically, yung acceleration means speeding up or slowing down as long as it has changing in speed. Okay? So, it's a measurement of how quickly, gaano ba kabilis yung pag-change ng speed ng object. So, that pertains to acceleration. Okay? So, yan, gaano kabilis yung pag-change ng speed ng object. Okay? So, what does F is equal to ma mean? Kasi binigyan tayo dito ng formula, F is equal to ma. So, ano ba yung ibig sabihin niyan? Okay? So, here, force is directly proportional to mass and acceleration. Okay? So, force is directly proportional to mass and acceleration. Medyo nakakalito, di ba? So, imagine a ball of a certain mass moving at a certain acceleration. So, the ball has a certain force. So, ganun yun. So now imagine So, wait for a while So may kakausapin lang ako saglit. Ay, wala po, ma'am. Wala, ma'am. Hindi pa ako, ma'am, nakakakuha dun sa... Oh my God. Wala po po na. Okay, so let's continue. So...
Sir, may kukunin lang po.
Okay. Okay, so let's continue. So now imagine we make a ball twice as big. So double the mass, so dinouble yung mass, but the acceleration constant. So F is equal to ma says that this new ball has twice the force of an old ball. Okay, so yon. So kasi if pinagtasan mo yung mass, so yung force will also be twice if it will have the same acceleration. So nagigets nyo ba? So if you increase the mass, okay, so in order for that particular object to accelerate at the same acceleration as before, so the force will also be needed to increase twice. Okay? So pag dinouble mo yung mass, so the force will need to be doubled in order for that object to have the same acceleration as before. Okay? So nakukuha nyo? So now, imagine the original ball moving at twice the original acceleration. So yun imagine the original ball moving twice at the original acceleration. So nadoble yung acceleration. So F is equal to ma says that the ball will again have the twice the force of the ball at the original acceleration. Nagigets nyo? So kung i-double mo yung acceleration, so the force will be needed to be doubled for that acceleration to maintain a doubled acceleration. Nagigets nyo? So I want you to take note of this. Bakit kaya ganito yung equation? Okay? So sinasabi kasi that the force is directly proportional to mass and acceleration. Okay? So if you look at let me repeat yung explanation natin. Bakit kaya yung F is equal to ma? So pag sinabing directly proportional yung force to mass and acceleration, that means, so tatagalogin ko na lang para hindi sa inyo para hindi masyadong hassle sa pag-intindi. So pag yung mass mo dinouble, okay? So mas nilakihan mo yung yung mass ng object. So in order for that object to have the same direction as before, the force must be doubled. Kasi yung sabi ko baga, yung if the force has greater mass, more force will be needed. Okay, more force will be needed for that particular object to have the same acceleration or change in the state of speed. Okay? So kapag tinasan mo yung mass, okay, so the force will be needed to para taasan din para magkaroon ng the same acceleration. Okay? So yun. What about naman when the acceleration, pag tinaas mo yung acceleration o yung pag-change ng speed, so yung force, more force will be needed. Kaya force must be doubled also. Mas kailangan mo siyang taasan para magkaroon ng ma-maintain yung the same acceleration. Nakukuha nyo ba yung ibig sabihin dito? Be honest, nakukuha ba? Hindi masyado nakukuha. Okay, so yun.
Remind na daw natin ni Jayla.
Okay. So hindi niyo nakukuha yung dito, yung explanation.
Sir, hindi po masyado.
Hindi masyado. So yun, basta kung hindi nyo masyado naiintindihan, you can watch videos about law of acceleration. Okay? So, wait lang So, yun. So, panoorin muna natin. So, manood tayo ng law of acceleration para at least mas maintindihan nyo. So, meron dito ang video.
Sir,
Po?
isasend mo po ulit yun.
Okay, so let me share this to you. So, let's watch this. Okay, so, wait, baka di ko na share yung sa. Okay, so, let's watch this.
Do you remember the Newton's first law of motion? It says that an object will continue to do what it's doing unless acted upon by an unbalanced force or some net force. Now the important question is, what happens when there is net force acting on an object? That's precisely what the second law of motion will discuss. Do you remember understanding the first law of motion with a simple diagram? If the forces are balanced, the acceleration will be zero. In the first case, the object will continue to remain at rest, and in the second, the object will continue to stay in motion at the same velocity and in the same direction. Don't forget, these two cases will remain true only if the forces are balanced, only if the net force is zero. Now let's try to create a similar diagram for the second case. If the forces are unbalanced, then there will be acceleration. We saw that in the previous video. And now we come to the interesting part. Let me ask you a question and I'm sure you can answer it. On which two factors do you think the acceleration will depend on? I want you to tax your brain a bit. Let me repeat my question. On which two factors do you think will the acceleration depend on? Okay, let's say there's an object on a table. You apply a net force of 10 units on it. And then you apply a net force of 20 units on it. In which case do you think the acceleration will be more? Of course, the one in which the force was more. So we can say that one of the things the acceleration depends on is net force.
Okay.
If it's more, then more will be the acceleration. If it's less, then lesser will be the acceleration. Acceleration depends directly on the net force. Come on, now I want you to think about the second quantity the acceleration will depend on. Let's say there are two objects on the table. One has a mass of 3 kilograms and the other has a mass of 5 kilograms. Now, if you apply net force of 10 units to each of them, which one do you think will accelerate more? Surely, it's the 3 kg one because it has lesser mass.
Okay, so tandaan nyo same net force, 10 units or 10 Newton. Okay, so let's apply the Newton dito. Okay, so 10 Newton will move the 5 kilograms and 10 Newton will move the 3 kilograms. So which do you think will move faster or mas magaan? So,
Sir. 3 kilograms.
so it's actually the 3 kilogram object. Okay, so the lesser the mass, more acceleration will be generated. Okay, so yon. Okay, so dito inversely. Bakit? If you increase the acceleration, if you increase the mass, acceleration will be decreased. Okay? So if you increase the mass, acceleration will be decreased. Kaya siya inversely proportional. Kaya 1 over mass yung nakalagay. Okay? Inversely proportional siya. Okay? So nagigets nyo? Okay, so
Ayun lang po, sir.
okay, sige na. Okay, so acceleration. So, yung kanina baga F is equal to ma. So, F is equal to ma. So, acceleration is directly proportional to the net force. Kasi, yun yung una nating di ba? Applied and inversely proportional to the mass of the object. So tingnan nyo, A is equal to F net. F net kasi yung acceleration is directly proportional to the force. Pero nasa baba yung M. Kaya because inversely proportional to the mass of an object. Okay, so inversely, kaya nasa baba yung mass. Nakukuha nyo? So acceleration is inversely proportional to the mass, kaya siya nasa ilalim. Acceleration is directly proportional to the force, kaya siya nasa taas. Nakukuha nyo? Kaya yung formula natin, A is equal to F net over M. So mamaya, makukuha natin kung paano na-derive yung F is equal to MA. Okay? Okay, so yan. So F is equal to MA. So ito na yung kanina. So dinerive niya lang yung F. Okay, so if you're going to get the F, you are going to cross-multiply it. So if you cross-multiply it, so F net, so wait lang pakita ko sa inyo. Karoon tayo ng annotation. So if you cross-multiply, sorry, wait lang So if you cross-multiply it, para ma-get mo yung, if for example, you're getting the, kasi dito, meron niyang always invisible na 1. Okay, so if you cross-multiply it, so F times 1, magiging F net. Okay, so A times M or M times A, magiging ito, M times A. So pinag-cross-multiply niya, kaya na-derive niya, if you're going to get the force, na-derive niya yung ganitong formula. Nagigets nyo? Diba, it's a basic concept sa mathematics, yung pagdi-derive ng formula. So, if you're going, eto, yung formula kapag hinahanap yung acceleration. But if you're going to get the force, so this will be the formula. So, in order for you to get this, so just cross-multiply it. So, sa A, meron niyang always invisible na 1. Kasi whole number, meron niyang palaging 1 sa ilalim ang mga whole number. Okay, so 1 over 1, 1. So 2 over 1, 2. Kaya hindi na nilalagay yung 1. Okay, so F net times 1, cross multiply, so will be F net. Okay, so ito yan. So A times M or M times A will be M times A dito, yung formula. So nagigets nyo? So it's just simple mathematical procedures how to derive formula. Okay? So, let's continue.
The net force is the product of mass and acceleration. With this, can you tell me the units of force? That should be easy. The standard unit of mass is kilograms, and that of acceleration is meters per second squared.
And yung force?
So the unit of force is kilograms times meters per second squared.
Okay, so
and this is what 1 Newton is the mass of the object.
Okay, so yung product ng kilogram ng mass at saka meters per second squared will result to the unit of force, which is the Newton. Okay, so tandaan nyo yun. Okay, so the product of mass and acceleration, which is kilogram and meters per second respectively, will result to Newton, which is the product of or unit of force. Okay? So, yun. Ano po, mother? Okay, so, yan. Let's continue.
Force.
Oh, what will be the force in this subject, in this problem? Can I ask Jana? So, example yung nahuhulog na ball. 10 kilogram ball, tapos yung acceleration niya is 10 meters per second. Because yung gravitational acceleration natin is 9.8 meters per second squared. And that can also be rounded off to 10 meters per second squared. So, what will be the force in that ball? Gravitational force in that ball. Jana? Or the F net? Using that formula, F is equal to ma. You just follow this formula, F net is equal to ma. So therefore, you're going to multiply it. So ilan ba? Jana?
Sir, 100 po.
Okay, so 100. 100 lang ba? Complete. Complete your answer. 100. Unit. I want the unit of force. 100.
100 kilogram mass per second.
Hindi. Yung kilogram meters per second squared, pag minultiply mo na siya, yun na yung unit ng force. So ano yun? Ito. 100 what? Ano yung unit ng force, Jana?
Kilogram po.
Force? Ang kilogram is for mass. Ang meters per
Newton po.
Okay, so yan. So 100 Newton. So the answer for this one is 100 Newton. So let's see if 100 Newton talaga. Wait lang. May dumadating pa din. So let's see.
This will equal 100 newtons.
Okay, so 100 Newton.
We can say that 1 newton is defined as the amount of force required to give a 1 kilogram mass and acceleration of 1 meter per second squared. Acceleration of 1 meter per second squared.
Okay, so yon. 1 kilogram mass, 1 force or 1 Newton force means 1 kilogram mass or requires 1 kilogram mass and acceleration of 1 meter per second squared. So, yun na yung sa law of acceleration. So, I hope you understand na yung law of acceleration ha. So, naintindihan nyo na yung law of acceleration.
Opo.
So, kung bakit kaya F is equal to ma. So, tandaan nyo yung relationship ng nga yung relationship ng force tsaka ng acceleration. Ano yung relationship nila? Directly or inversely proportional?
Directly.
Okay, so directly proportional yung force and acceleration. What about acceleration and mass? Acceleration and mass, ano yung relationship
Inversely
nila?
proportional.
So, inversely proportional. Okay? So, what about mass and acceleration? Mass and acceleration, ano yung relationship nila? Class. Mass and acceleration. I'm addressing this question to anyone in this class. What about the relationship of mass and acceleration? Imagine yourself. Imagine nyo na lang, makakasagot kayo. Mass and acceleration, what will be the relationship? Directly or inversely?
Sir, inverse.
Okay,
Inversely.
so inversely, hindi inversely inversely proportional. Bakit? If you increase the mass, so the acceleration will be lesser. Okay, so if you decrease the mass, so the acceleration will be greater. Okay? So, yun. So, tandaan nyo yung mga relationship ng mga factors na yan. So, yung mga variables, tandaan nyo dapat yung relationship. Okay, so, I think we can continue na doon sa slide natin. Okay, so yan. So, naintindihan nyo na why F is equal to ma. So, let's skip this slide na. Okay? So, more about F is equal to ma. So, if you double the mass, you double the force. If you double the acceleration, you double the force. Okay? So yun. Kasi force is directly proportional to acceleration and mass. Okay? So, force is directly proportional to acceleration and mass. Okay? So, yan. So, what if you double the mass and acceleration? So, nilagyan mo ng 2 kasi double. So the answer will be 4 times the amount of force yung kailangan. Nakukuha nyo? Nagigets nyo? Y2m is equal to 2a is equal to 4f. Kasi, dinoble mo yung mass, so yung force kailangan mong i-double. But, pag dinoble mo pa yung acceleration, so dalawang double, so 4. 4 times amount of force yung kailangan. Nakukuha nyo? Okay, so nakukuha. Nag-ano si Herminio. Okay, so doubling the mass and acceleration quadruples. Pag sinabing quadruple, 4 times. Okay, so quad. Quad something. Basta quad, ano yan? 4 times. Okay, so quadruples the force. So, what if you decrease the mass by half? How much force would the object have now? Okay, so hinati mo yung mass ng kalahati. Ano yung mangyayari sa force? So, remember the relationship of a force and a mass. Okay, so pag hinati mo yung mass by half, ano mangyayari sa force? Herminio? Concept pa lang tayo, hindi pa tayo dumadating sa problem solving part. Pag hinati mo yung mass from this equation, 'di ba? Meron tayong wait lang, wala kasi akong So let's have annotate. Okay, so dito ko na lang sa katabi. So pag hinati mo yung mass, so therefore yung 1/2 na m yun. Okay? So times, so let's say yung A, hindi mo ginalaw, it's a constant, A. So what will happen to force? What will happen to force, Herminio? If you cut the mass by half or decrease the mass by half.
Sir, 1F.
1F. Bakit parang hindi ka sure? So, in the relationship of a force and a mass, okay, so force and a mass, so if you decrease the mass, sabi ko baga, ang force and the mass, the higher the mass, more force will be needed. So, therefore, it's directly proportional to each other. So, if it's directly proportional to each other, if you increase the mass, you increase the force. But if you decrease the mass by half, you will be decreasing the force by half as well. Okay? In order there for you to attain the equality between these variables. Okay? So yan. Okay? So, if you decrease the mass by half, you decrease also the force by half to maintain the equality of the equation. Okay? So, yan. So, what does F is equal to MA mean? So, F is equal to MA basically means that the force of an object comes from its mass and acceleration. So, alam nyo na yan. Okay? So, yun. So, something very massive or high mass. Okay? So, that's changing speed very slowly. Okay? Low acceleration like a glacier. Alam nyo yung glacier? Yung mga nasa North Pole, South Pole. Yung mga... Okay, so glacier can still have a great force. Diba? So, something like a very massive like yung glacier, changing speed very slowly. So, very slowly, kaya low yung acceleration. Okay, so can still have great force. Why? Kasi, since very massive siya, so if you increase the mass, more force will be generated. Okay? So, and less acceleration. So, kaya yung mga valley, alam niyo yung valley? Yung mga canyon. Okay? So, yun yung na-form out of glacier. Okay? So, because of greater mass yung sa mga glacier. Okay? So, yun yung application na malalaman natin based from this equation. Okay? So, next. So, something very small, like low mass, that's changing speed very quickly. Okay? Like a bullet. Okay? So, high acceleration kasi very quickly can still have a great force. So, something very slow, something very small, changing speed very slowly will have a very weak force. Na-guess yung example dito. So, something very small, low mass, kasi nga small, thus changing very speed quickly. So, smaller force, lower mass, but higher acceleration. So, can still have a great force. Why? Okay? So, because acceleration is directly proportional to force. Okay? So, mataas yung acceleration, kasi mabilis like a bullet, mataas din yung force. Okay? So, mababa yung mass, so more force will be generated. Something like a small changing speed very slowly will have a weak force. So very small, kapag nag-change na ng speed very slowly, will have a weak force. Pero kapag yung very small, nag-change siya very quickly, will have a greater force, like a bullet. Okay? Nagigets niyo yung example? So this one is a good representation of F is equal to ma. Okay? So, nasa second law pa lang tayo, ha? So, next. Okay, so third law. Can we still have the time? Anong oras na ba? Okay.
9:23 po, sir.
Okay, so we still have the time. 20 minutes. Okay? So, for the third law of motion, so sabi ko baga, as I said earlier, law of interaction or law of action-reaction. So, nasa page 23 of your book. Okay, so law of action-reaction. Okay. So, it states, class, that for every action, there is an equal yet opposite reaction. Okay? Action, reaction. Okay, so paano to nangyayari? So what does this mean? For every force acting on an object, there is an equal force acting in opposite direction. Okay? So right now, gravity is pulling you down in your seat, nakaupo kayo. So but Newton's third law says that your seat is pushing up against you. And that is the opposite yet equal force. So, kaya hindi kayo gumagalaw. Okay? So, hindi kayo tumataas, hindi kayo bumababa. So, this is why you are not moving. There is a balanced force between the gravity and the normal force. Okay? So, nagigets nyo? Action, reaction. Okay? So, yan. So, when you're sitting, two forces are balanced, gravity and the normal force. So, think about it. What happens if you are standing on a skateboard on a slippery floor, so madulas na floor, and push against the wall? So, you slide in an opposite direction away from the wall. So, nagigets nyo? So, imagine yourself, what happens if you are standing on a skateboard? Alam niyo yung skateboard? Okay, so, or a slippery floor and push against the wall. So, nag-push kayo against the wall. So, you slide in the opposite direction. Aatras kayo. Okay? Because the wall will push back on you. Okay? So, you push on the wall, but the wall push back on you with an equal and opposite force. So, I hope you're getting what the sense of this. So, another example. Why does it hurt so much when you step on your toe? Okay, so when your toe exerts a force on the rock, so nasipa mo yung rock, so the rock also exerts an equal force back on your toe. So, because it's a law of interaction, action-reaction. The harder you hit your toe against it, the more force rock exerts back on you. So more force will be given to the rock, and more force will also be given back to you. Okay? To your toe. Okay? So, and the more your toe hurts. Okay? So, yan. Kapag nasusungkog, ang tawag dito dun sa amin. Nasusungkog. Pag nasusungkog na yan. Okay? Okay, so I have another video which I'm gonna show you. So, last na to, law of interaction. Tapusin lang natin yung oras.
The only question you need to ask yourself while studying the third law is, what happens when two objects interact with each other? What happens when you place an object on the table? The object exerts a force on the table and the subject exerts an upward force on the object. There are two forces that result from this interaction. A force on the table and a force on the object.
Okay, so same forces, downward and upward, but the direction are of opposite. So, downward and upward. So, yung action force, downward, reaction, upward. Ganun lang kadali yung statement dyan. Okay, so...
Say a bird is flying upwards. Will the Newton's third law apply here?
Yes.
Sometimes the third law is not so obvious. You'd probably say that the bird is the only object here and there's no second object. But that's not correct. The wings of the bird push the air downwards and the air pushes the bird upward.
Fly upward.
Action and reaction forces make it possible for birds to fly. We take one last example to understand something very interesting about the third law. What happens when a gun is fired? You're right, it exerts a forward force on the bullet. And the bullet exerts an equal and opposite reaction force on the gun.
Okay.
And this exists in recoil of the gun. A perfect example of Newton's third law. But hold on. If the force exerted by the gun on the bullet is the same as the force exerted by the bullet on the gun, then why doesn't the gun recoil with the same acceleration as the bullet? The gun recoils, yes, but it doesn't recoil at the same acceleration as the bullet, right?
Okay. Because...
Same magnitude of forces, but different accelerations.
Okay, so
Why do you think this happens? Okay, so if your concept of the second law of motion was clear, you wouldn't really be surprised with this.
Okay, so very good.
The second law of motion says that the force is the product of the object's mass and acceleration. Or the acceleration of the object is equal to the force over its mass. What does this tell us? Yes, if the mass is more, then the acceleration will be less. In this example, the mass of the gun is much more than that of the bullet.
This particular problem.
Hence, the acceleration of the rifle is lesser than that of the bullet. If you're in a boat and step out of it onto the land, there are two forces involved. You pushing the boat behind and the boat pushing you forward.
Okay, so
And that's why you see the boat go behind,
equal amount of force.
go forward. Now let's say a sailor jumps off a huge ship. The sailor does apply a force on the ship and the ship also applies a force on the sailor. But do you think the ship will accelerate as much as the sailor?
Okay, no.
Not really.
So, ako na yung
And I
sumagot.
think you know why.